Hey guys, this is Eric from MMOs.com doing a quick week news recap of all major MMO news and announcements of the week ending August 10th, 2020. This has been number 257 recap, and the first of news this week comes from Square Enix regarding Final Fantasy XIV. The game's previously announced patch 5.3 update, Reflections and Crystal just released their preliminary patch notes. The update itself is still scheduled to launch on August 11th, which is tomorrow, and will be the first Final Fantasy XIV update in some time. Patch 5.3 continues the game's main storyline, introduces flying in the base game areas for the first time, revamps New Game Plus, expands the gardening system, and most importantly, at least in my opinion, introduces new Unreal Trials, which are revamped versions of older fights and designed to be more challenging. In related news too, Final Fantasy XIV now has over 1.2 million active characters, the most the game has ever had, so Square Enix is absolutely killing it with Final Fantasy XIV, and that's mostly due to the coronavirus lockdowns. Basically, every gaming company right now is having an amazing year so far because everyone's staying at home playing games. And speaking of game companies having an amazing year, Nexon reported their Q2 2020 earnings report this last week and had an absolutely amazing quarter with total revenues hitting $610 million thanks to stellar performance from MapleStory in South Korea. As always, Nexon made most of their money in South Korea, followed by China. North America is a tiny percentage of their revenues at 6%. And MapleStory, despite being 17 years old now, is still minting money, with the game hitting an all-time high in revenues for the quarter. The game's revenue in South Korea has increased 151% year over year and 173% year over year in North America. Nexon's company-wide average revenue per paying user came in at $55 for the quarter, with 50.3% of active players spending money. As always though, Nexon's North American operations continue to lose money, with the North American division reporting a $1 million operating loss for the most recent quarter. North America has been a money loser for Nexon for 10 years in a row now, but it's possible things are turning around, as Nexon only lost $1 million this last quarter, which is a massive improvement over previous years. So hopefully Nexon will be eventually making money in North America, and with the recent acquisitions they might be able to do that. But the big takeaway here is that MapleStory is still doing amazing despite being 17 years old. The game is still minting money, and so is Dungeon Fighter Online. Dungeon Fighter Online and MapleStory are the two big games that Nexon has that pretty much makes all their money. Switching gears back to actual MMORPG related news, Fantasy Online 2 officially launched on Steam this last week and is off to an incredible start. The game is hitting over 18,000 peak concurrent players every day since launch and averaging over 14,000 players or so. These are incredible figures and makes PSO2 the fourth most popular MMORPG on the platform after Elder Scrolls Online, Final Fantasy XIV, and Path of Exile. I'm sure some people are still playing the regular Windows Store version as well, because once you install it, it's still very convenient to launch it through the Windows Store. The Steam launch also coincides with the launch of Episode 4, so if you haven't played PSO2 yet, I strongly recommend at least trying it. It's really one of the only MMORPG launches of 2020, which is actually not bad. Even though it's not really a new game, it's still fairly solid. I'm enjoying it so far myself. It's one of the best instance dungeon, persistent hub style MMORPGs I've played. Now, speaking of Path of Exile, Grinding Gear Games announced that their patch 3.12 is on schedule for launch on PC on September 18th and consoles on September 23rd. With the recently launched Harvest League ending just days before the 3.12 launch, it looks like despite the coronavirus delays and other issues, Grinding Gear Games is back on track with their 13-week development cycles, and we'll be getting more details about patch 3.12 on September 1st if all goes according to plan. Path of Exile remains one of the most popular Western-developed free-to-play games in the West, averaging a little over 30,000 players online at any given time on Steam, which is pretty incredible. Up next, a small bit of news for Elder Scrolls Online. ZeniMax announced that the MMORPG will be launching on PS5 and Xbox One Series X next-gen consoles with backwards compatibility and cross-play with their older console counterparts. I expect that the next-gen version should run a bit smoother, but the experience for PC users isn't going to change at all with this announcement, but console players will have a lot to look forward to if they get the new consoles, because again, the game will run much smoother on next-gen hardware. And everything, of course, will be backwards compatible. Next up, InMass is releasing a new 64-bit client for Tera, which promises a smoother gameplay experience and less crashes, and according to developers, will also open up new possibilities for developing future content for the fantasy action and MMORPG. This may not seem like a big deal, but it should be a huge improvement in performance. In fact, it's kind of ridiculous that such an old game like Tera can still lag on modern PCs. Tera launched all the way back in 2012, but still, because of its old client, it's been buggy and has had issues with many people. The 64-bit client is launching on August 11th alongside a new 20-player rate as well. Every old MMORPG that still wants to be relevant needs to focus on performance and updating their clients, and I'm glad to see Tera finally doing this. Next up, Tree of Savior is bringing back high-speed leveling servers starting on August 11th, which is tomorrow. This new server will feature 300% XP increase and drop rate boosts, as well as a 20% increase in extraction bonuses and reduced enhancement and stage transcendence cost, with some other goodies to speed things up along the way. The speed up servers goes live tomorrow and runs until November 10th, and afterwards will eventually merge with existing servers. So you can basically level up your character really quickly on these servers, and then eventually it becomes a normal server. And the crazy thing about Tree of Savior is they've already kind of sped up leveling and made the game a lot easier already, so this is only going to be compounding on that, so the gameplay is going to be so much easier and so much faster until late game. You get like level 150, 200 plus nowadays, basically just one-shotting bosses. It's super easy. But again, the game does pick up later on. And if you haven't played this one yet, I do think it's worth trying because it has some of the best music I've heard in any MMORPG. Plus, it still averages over 2,500 or so players on any given time on Steam, which is pretty solid. Next up, a small bit of news for Ironsight, the free-to-play FPS game developed by Whipple Games. Looks like GameGo version of the game will be shutting down on August 10th, which is today, with a new version published by its developer will be replacing it on August 15th on Steam. Any progress in the official GameGo version on Steam will be lost forever, but the game will be going live as a self-published game by the Korean developer on the 15th. It looks like GameGo basically gave up on the title and is not paying the renewal fees. It basically wants to give up the license to the game, but fortunately, it doesn't mean the game is dead forever. Again, it'll be launching through its self-published through its developer for the foreseeable future. The free-to-play lobby shooter market is stupidly competitive though, with games like Valorant and CSGO taking up most of the market, but you also have games like Black Squad and Combat Arms competing for the same audience, so it's really tough to make it as one of these free-to-play FPS games, and Ironsight clearly has a tough road ahead of it. Up next, Crowfall, the perpetually coming soon crowdfunded MMORPG is launching its beta test tomorrow on the 11th, and anyone can sign up for a chance to enter. Anyone who did back the game in the past is automatically into the beta though, and will have a chance to playtest the newest version of the game. Crowfall officially launched into alpha earlier in May, and this new launch is considered beta now, so they are making progress towards an eventual full release. I'm still not super optimistic on Crowfall or any of these other crowdfunding games, but hopefully they do launch, and Crowfall does seem to be making progress, but I'll hold my breath till we get a full, real launch. And now, speaking of perpetually coming soon crowdfunding games, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen is launching its pre-alpha test on September 5th, which runs for 1 day and closed on September 6th to test out the Alpha 5 features before the start of the real alpha test. So if anything, this is a pre-alpha, if that makes sense. This pre-alpha test will center around the Dire Lord and Shaman classes, quests, and revamped battle systems. The actual pre-alpha 5 itself will be taking place shortly after this test, assuming everything goes smoothly. Plus, they'll be testing out other content as well. But yeah, Pantheon seems to be making progress, but again, there's so many of these crowdfunded games, and I'm just going to wait till one of them actually launches before I get too excited. Next up, Update 28 launched this last week for Twin Saga, the anime MMORPG from X-Legend. Patch 28 introduces a new seasonal senshi, a new mutated dungeon, new main story quest, new PvP gear, and 2 new seasonal events. Twin Saga isn't nearly as popular as X-Legend's other anime MMORPG, Aura Kingdom, but has been running continuously since 2016, so the game's been around for 4 years now. The game's player base on Steam, though, is pretty dead, averaging just 55 or so players online at once. Though I actually played this game when it first launched a good chunk, and I did enjoy it. The story's actually pretty funny, and the localization team had a lot of fun with it. If you never played it, it's not bad. It won't hold your attention for more than a couple weeks, or even a few days if you go full ham on it, but I think it's worth checking out if you never played it, only because it's not terrible. It's not, there you go, it's not terrible. The Aura Kingdom is probably better. Up next, while Magic Legends is taking some share of the digital card game market, Hearthstone is still king, and it just launched its Scholarman's Academy expansion this last week, which introduces 135 new cards and a new Spellburst keyword. And while Hearthstone continues to do well, it hasn't been really breaking any new records lately, as Blizzard barely mentioned the game on their last earnings call. So while the game is still doing pretty well, it's not really shattering records or doing anything crazy right now. And while I haven't played too much Hearthstone myself in ages, the game is still doing really well. It's still kind of the default, collectible card game, digital card game out there. The next and last news this week comes from a game we almost never talk about, but it's actually one of the most popular MMOs out there, and that's Grand Theft Auto Online, which is the online version of GTA 5, and it's getting a massive update this coming week, which will add new vehicles, new missions, new deep sea diving, business battles, and much more. GTA 5 originally launched back in 2013, making it over 7 years old now, but it's still hugely successful and averaged over 81,000 players online at a given time on Steam alone, and likely much more off Steam, as the game launched for friggin' Epic Games Store just recently. The game is absolutely killing it. It's actually one of the most successful video games of all time, making billions in revenue so far, so GTA 5 and GTA Online has been doing phenomenal. And I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, but I've actually never played GTA 5, and I should probably give it a try. Anyway guys, that's it for MMO News this week. I'll see you guys next time. Later guys.